Hey everyone, my name is Sindel and welcome to this first episode of this Mine-imator tutorial series. This video will be a basic getting started video to Mine-imator where we'll go over the whole interface as well as the timeline which involves creating keyframes and also some general animation basics. Let's go! This is what you'll first see as soon as you start up a new project. The center view is your work window. You can move around the world to see everything that is going on in your animation. To move around you can use WASD while holding the right mouse button. Holding shift while moving around will also make you go more slowly, and holding spacebar will make you go faster. And the button at the bottom right corner of the work window is the shading. This is a preview of what your animation will look like with proper lighting when it's fully rendered into a video file. Usually you would want to keep this turned off while you are animating depending on how many objects there are in the world, since it can tend to slow the program down a bit. The top is the general settings where you can save, load, render and start projects, as well as your workbench where you can import characters, objects and lighting into your project. Right is the project properties where you can find your objects you have created in your library, files used in your project and your resources, and also where you can adjust the environment and atmosphere of the world in the background, which we will get into in another episode. And finally, the bottom is the timeline for animating your project and moving characters and objects around in time and space, which we are just about to get into. One thing you may be interested in knowing is that you can move these tabs around on the screen so you can arrange your workspace depending on personal preference. Me, personally, I just like to keep it at default, so there you go. Before we get into the timeline, I'll quickly go over the workbench. Like I said, the workbench is where you can import characters, objects, and lighting into your project. Most animation programs don't really have a benefit of having characters and objects you can start working with straight away, so you would have to model everything yourself. But with Mine-imator, everything you need is already there. Pretty much every single model for Minecraft is here and is all in the workbench, available for use straight away. Now there's the point where we can start talking some things about animating. To start, I should tell you about keyframes. They are what you will be working with when animating in the timeline. Basically, keyframes are what maps out an action from point A to point B. In traditional 2D animation, the start and end pose of an action would be drawn first, called keyframes, or keys for short. Then there would be further poses put in between showing how they perform that action, called breakdowns or extremes. Maybe some more further breakdowns depending on animator preference. From there they can start filling in the in-betweens. In 3D animation like Maya or some other advanced program like Maya or Blender and stuff, there would still be keyframes involved and some breakdowns too, but all the in-betweens are automatically filled out by the computer, so it pretty much helps trim the amount of work you have to do. Keyframes in Mine-imator are represented by square diamond shapes on the timeline. To create one, have your mouse and marker over where you want the keyframe to be created and double click. Automatically the keyframe menu should open up beside your workspace. These options can be adjusted to where the object is in space, as well as rotation, scale, and also a fancy option called transitioning, which we are also about to get into in just a moment. So for our animation example, we won't be animating a person just yet, unfortunately. We will be animating a ball, and the point of this is to teach you some basics in fluid looking animation for how it can all add up into a full character performance. Let's have this ball move from left to right, but how would it move from left to right? Well, the ball could move with equal spacing, moving at a constant speed the whole way through, but having it move like this just looks very mechanical and straightforward. I say this because humans in real life wouldn't move their body parts like this. That's because robots are one of the only things that move their body parts at the same speed the whole time. The transition feature is what defines the way the object moves from the first keyframe to the next. By default it would be set to linear, which is what's causing it to move robotically. So let's select the action's first keyframe, go to transitions and select ease in and ease out. You may notice that now that when you play it that the ball is in more control of itself, starting off slowly first, speeding up and then finishing slowly. There are other kinds of actions we could add to it too, like we might probably just have it start accelerating by itself or have it slow down to a stop. But if we want to be really fancy, we could even make it stop what it is doing immediately during its action. You may think that it will just stop dead center when its track's not going anywhere, but the momentum would actually carry the object forward a bit before stopping. There's an option available for this in the transitions, but it would just look a bit more realistic if we'd add more keyframes to act as breakdowns at the end of animating it ourselves. There will be one keyframe where the object may be tilted forward slightly with a very short distance from the last keyframe with a transition on ease out. Then there would be a short gap with nothing happening in between for a couple of frames, then the last part of the action would be the object getting back in balance again. This is similar to, for example, how you might regain balance when you are either running or being pushed by something. Your body will carry forward a bit as you simultaneously get yourself upright. If you just stop and not take any opportunity to regain your balance, you're probably just going to flop onto the ground. Now that we have gone that out of the way, let's talk about something a little bit more complicated. Timing. This is something I want to mention because I strongly believe it would be super helpful for you when animating anything at all. In a nutshell, timing helps convey behavior and physics in a character or an object by having actions happen sooner or later. This can be measured by how far apart you place keyframes to one another. If keyframes are really far apart from each other, the action will appear to be very slow. If it is very close to each other, it will appear to be very fast. Let's apply this to a character model. Like if someone is walking like a normal person would, they would appear to be feeling very neutral. If we slow it down, they would appear to be feeling tired or sad. If we speed it up, they may appear to be excited or anxious. While this may sound like a very simple thing to get your head around, it will say a lot about the animation's concept you are delivering. We can also have it communicate weight or physics. Using the example of a ball, having it move really fast might make it look like a tennis ball. Having it move really slow would make it look like a bowling ball. Or even scale. If we have a small little slime ball bouncing away, it would be moving pretty quickly, right? If it is huge in scale, gravity would make it appear to take longer to do so. If you want, you can imagine timing as part of seconds between each keyframe, but it is most commonly known as frames. Frames is every animator's use of measuring time. If you were a 2D animator, one frame is one drawing. In 3D animation, it would instead be considered as what's called the tempo. Film most commonly runs at 24 frames per second, which means 24 pictures in 1 second. To change this in Mine-imator, you can go to your project properties and change the tempo. By default, it will be at 24, which is what it should be. If you want, you can bring the tempo up or down, but I recommend keeping it where it currently is. So when you are measuring frames in your timeline, it will be at every 24 position or how many keyframes you can fit into 1 second. This is how you can measure 1 second of animation. Mine-imator will also say how far you are into a video with a timer at the top. What I just covered was some basic animation techniques I think you need to know if you are using Mine-imator as a beginner animator. The reason I wanted to put this in the video is because I've seen so many Mine-imator users having pretty narrow and linear looking animation, which I think there would be areas of improvement in. I've also had people in the past ask me about how they can animate in my style, and while that may be almost an impossible question to answer, cause it kinda is, it's also very ambiguous, mostly because everyone has their own way of going about doing things, so teaching you some techniques on making good looking animation is probably the best I can do to showing you how to work in my style. In all honesty, I don't think I've perfected my style just yet. Just cause I'm not a professional yet, and I'll never be able to reach a point where there's no developing left to do. Everyone's style is unique in its own way and it's up to you to unleash it. Oh, and by the way, if you're a Mine-imator user watching this hoping to learn something I've not mentioned, we'll possibly get in more detail with that with animation techniques in the next episode. We will be diving back into timing and starting to learn character animation as well as the painful walk cycle, and who knows, maybe some other things too. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Catch you all later, take care.